Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari. Yasodanandana Braja Janarandana. Yasodanandana Braja Janarandana. Yamuna Tiravanachari. Yamuna Tiravanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Yasodanandana Braja Janaranjana. Yasodanandana Braja Janaranjana. Yamuna Tiravanachari. Yamuna Tiravanachari. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajikacharya Asatara Satyashi Śrīmad. His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. And Antakoti Vaishnav Vrinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Shri Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Go Gopinath Shai Mukunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhana Ki Jai. Vrindavan Dhama Ki Jai, Mathura Dhama Ki Jai, Navadvip Mayapur Dhama Ki Jai, Jagannath Puri Dhama Ki Jai, Gangamai Jamuna Devi Ki Jai, Bhakti Devi Ki Jai, Tulsi Maharani Ki Jai, Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai, Gaur Premanande. All glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga, all glories to Srila Prabhupada, Nama Om Vishnupadaya, Krishna Prastaya Bhutale, Śrīmate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namane, Namaste Sarasvati Deve, Gauravani Pacharane, Nivasesa Sanyavadi Bhaskachade Satarane. Vandeham Shri Guru, Shri Yuta Padakamalam, Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha, Shri Rupam Sagrajatam, Sahagana Raganatam Vitam Tam Sajivam, Sadvaitam, Sadvadutam, Parijana Sahita Krishna Chaitanya Devam, Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha, Vanchakalpa Trupascha, Kipasandabhya Patitanam Pavanevyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So it's the 27th, of June in Hillsborough, North Carolina, and in 2022. And we're reading from Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, Canto 10, Chapter 37, Text 12. Atmanatma Shraya Purvam Mayaya Sastraje Gunan Tairidam Satya Sankalpa Srijasyat Svyavavishvara. I had to practice that one a lot and I still didn't get it. Atmana, by your personal potency, Atma, of the spirit soul, Ashrayaha, the shelter, Purvam, first, Mayaya, by your creative energy, Sasrajay, you produced, Gunan, the basic modes of material nature, Tai, through these, Idam, this universe, Satya, always realized in fact, Sankalpaha, whose desires, Srijjasi, you create, Atsi, withdraw, Avasi, and maintain, Ishvaraha, the controller. BBT translation, you are the shelter. This is Narada Muni speaking to Krishna, trying to convince him to leave Vrindavan and go to Mathura and kill Kamsa. You are the shelter of all souls, and being the supreme controller, you fulfill your desires simply by your will. By your personal creative potency, you manifested in the beginning the primal modes of material nature, and through their agency, you create, maintain, and then destroy this universe. I'm going to, there's commentary by a number of acharyas, but I'm just going to read Jiva Goswami's. Narada shows the activity of Mahavishnu, since he is the chief Purusha and suitable for the job of creation. You create the gunas by your Maya. Since this implies dependence on some other entity, Maya, Sridhar Swami explains that Maya is a Shakti of the Lord. You are not invested with power by another living being like others are. Does this remind us of a conversation between Prahlad and Hiranyakashipu, right? Hiranyakashipu, where did you get your power? He says, from the same place you're getting your power, from God. But God doesn't have to get his power from anybody. So we'll read that again. You are not invested with power by another living being like others are. You give shelter to yourself by yourself. Should we read that again? You give shelter to yourself by yourself. Since you are not dependent on others. You create the gunas by your Shakti. You create the universe by those gunas which you have created, and maintain and destroy the universe also. You do not depend on others, Satya Sankalpa, and are thus the Lord Ishvaraha. Atmanatmashraya purvam mayaya sastraje gunam tair idam Satya Sankalpa srijas yat yasyavat Ishvaraha. You are the shelter of all souls, and being the supreme controller, you fulfill your desires simply by your will. By your personal creative potency, you manifested in the beginning the primal modes of material nature, and through their agency, you create, maintain, and then destroy this universe. So this is about how the Lord is Swarat. Rat is derived from Raj, and Swa means your own. You're your own king. You have full autonomy, yes? To be autonomy, to manage yourself. All of us would like to have some measure of autonomy, isn't it? Anybody here want to be completely dependent on others? It's something we're all afraid of. We're all afraid that I'll get some disease, or I'll have some accident, or just getting old, where I'll be dependent on others. Isn't it? It's one of our greatest fears. I remember my youngest son, Keshava, saying the worst part of being a child is your helplessness, how much you're dependent on others. Someone else tells you when to go to sleep, and you have to finish your broccoli before you can have your cookie. And we're thinking, I can't wait until I become an adult and I can eat my cookie before my broccoli. Right? We want this swarat. We want to have this independence. But the Lord is fully independent. He is this swarat. And I wanted to look at two main things here, that the Lord is his own shelter. I mean, in this translation it says you're the shelter of all souls. But I really like how Jiva Goswami says, you give shelter to yourself by yourself. So this is from the Atman Ashraya. Atman Ashraya. You give shelter to yourself by yourself. And also I wanted to look at the Satya Sankalpa, that all of your desires are fulfilled. So Satya means, of course, what? Truth, goodness, existence. What is? We have the word Sattva, which means basically isness, or goodness, or truthness. And Sankalpa means one's determination, one's desire, one's objective. So all your objectives are truth. All your objectives exist. Whatever you desire, it exists. So you are the shelter of yourself, and all your desires always exist. They're always there in truth. And I wanted to look at the jiva also as being such a sankalpa. So Krishna Priya spoke yesterday more about the context of this verse. She talked about how Narada Muni is trying to take Krishna out of Vrindavan and get him to do some adulting in Mathura. She was explaining that so beautifully yesterday, so I'm not going to talk on that today. I'm just going to talk about the philosophical content here of what Narada Muni is saying. So the Lord is his own shelter, and the example given here is of him creating, maintaining, and destroying the universes, right? Creating the modes of nature. And Jiva Goswami is saying this refers to the Mahapurusha, Mahavishnu. So we can say the creator of this world is Garbhodakashayi Vishnu. He's the one from whom the lotus stem comes, and Brahma is on the lotus stem, and he manifests the planets. But Garbhodakashayi Vishnu is resting on whom? He's resting on Anantasesh, who's Balaram, who's himself. And we can also say in the whole spiritual world, the whole manifestation of the spiritual world is Balaram, the planets. Yes? Krishna's sitting place, his shoes. He is himself giving shelter to himself. But Garbhodakashayi Vishnu, what's the other Purusha avatar before him? Kshirodakashayi Vishnu, and then Karanodakashayi Vishnu, who are manifestations of Vasudeva, Sankarshan, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha. So it's Krishna who's expanding and expanding and expanding and expanding. I think you gave a class about the different expansions not that long ago. There was some article in Back to Godhead some years ago about all the different expansions and incarnations. But they're all dependent on themselves. Krishna's Atma Ashraya. He's giving shelter to himself. We can't do that. We might think we can, isn't it? Like the little 4-year-old thinks, when I become an adult, I'm going to be my own shelter. Yes? We think like that probably when we were 4 or 5. I'm going to grow up and I'm going to decide what I'm going to do and how I'm going to do it and what's going to happen. But we find that that's not true. We're dependent on so many things. We're dependent on our government. We're dependent on our friends and family. We're dependent on our employers. We're dependent ultimately on nature. Even if you ended up on some deserted island with no government and no friends and no family, you'd still be dependent on nature, right? We couldn't produce our own food and our own air and our own water and like that. We cannot be our own shelter. Right? And even psychologically, it's hard to always be your own shelter, isn't it? It's difficult. We might try. I'm going through some really hard time in life, and I just do self-counseling. And that works up to a point. But at a certain point, you might have to go see some sort of a mental health provider, or you just talk to a friend, isn't it? Unless you become, we're going to get to the Atmaram. We're getting there. But I remember it was a little over 2 years ago when COVID first hit, and I got stuck in North Carolina, and I was kind of falling apart. And I was really kind of falling apart, and then kindly Maharaj called me and said, I heard you're not doing so well. And after he talked to me for like 5 minutes, then my problems were solved, that I couldn't solve myself. Sometimes it's like that, right? We can't always be our own shelter. We're not God. But Krishna can be his own shelter. Of course, it's very interesting. In rasa, we have this concept of the Vishaya and the Ashraya. Like one of the 5 components of rasa is vibhava, what stimulates rasa, and one of those subcategories is the alambana, what Prabhupada calls basic. And the alambana is the vishaya, the object of your affection, which is Krishna. Whether it's neutrality, servitorship, friendship, parental or conjugal, the object is Krishna. But then there's also the ashraya, the shelter. And the shelter are the other devotees who have a similar mood of love for Krishna to yourself. So if you love Krishna in the neutral rasa, your shelter are the other devotees in the neutral rasa. If you love Krishna in parental rasa, your shelter are the other devotees in parental rasa. Now what happens when Krishna is loving the jivas? Because it goes in the other direction also, right? It's not just that we love Krishna. Krishna is not an evil dictator, right? Like some Hitler, where he wants everyone to love him, but he doesn't love them, right? He changed the vows of the soldiers, all the military. Instead of making a vow to Germany, they had to make a vow to him personally, right? Everybody remembers that in their history. But did he love the German people? Did Hitler love the German people? How do we know he didn't love the German people? Yes, at the end of the war, he blamed the whole thing on the German people, and he said at the end of the war, Tristan, I wrote a history book in the 1980s. So at the end of the war, when he saw he was going to lose, he directed his generals to do what to Germany? Do any of you know? To destroy it. He said, destroy all the bridges and the highways and burn down the crops so that when our enemies come to take Germany, there'll be nothing to take. Totally evil, yes. So he asked everybody else to give him absolute allegiance, and he didn't even give people common human decency of having food to eat and a road to ride on. So Krishna's not like that. I mean, and this is actually our fear of surrender. This is why we don't surrender, actually. We think like that. We think, well, I'll give everything to Krishna, and what will I get? I'll lose my autonomy. I'll lose my freedom. He'll just take everything from me and give me nothing. This is our primal fear. But Krishna's not like that. And we're going to get to this in a minute about the Atmarama devotees. So Krishna also loves the devotees. For Krishna, the devotees are his Vishaya. The devotees are his object of love. And think about this for a minute. Let's say I love Krishna with everything that I have. That's the definition of prema. Prema is all of your love is invested in the Lord. So we have some little idea of how much love we have in this world. Not a very good idea. There's some little idea. If we can think of someone we love enough that we would sacrifice a tremendous amount for that person. But this is a little idea. We actually have far, far more love than that. But do we have infinite love? The soul does. But still, we're very tiny, aren't we? We're really tiny. So let's say I give everything I have to Krishna, and Krishna gives everything he has to me. Well, there you go. So for Krishna, his devotees are his object of love. But who could be Krishna's ashraya? Do you understand? Like, let's say I want to love Krishna as a friend. Let's say I'm a cowherd boy, I want to love Krishna as a friend. The other cowherd boys who think like me and feel like me are my ashraya. But who's Krishna's ashraya? Himself. Atma ashraya. He is always his own ashraya. Do you all follow? Yes? And his devotees, yes, but his devotees are more udipana. But she doesn't have, like, she's also, yes. So there you're going into very, perhaps more esoteric than I want to go. You're probably taking us into a depth of rasa that's beyond my pay grade. So Krishna is his own shelter. But thank you. And Krishna also, I want to go now to Satya Sankalpa. Whatever he wants is fulfilled. Whatever he wants is fulfilled. Yes? So there's a nice statement in the Chandogya Upanishad 3.14.2 about Krishna having this Satya Sankalpa. It's also in the 11th canto. This idea that his desire is truth. He has a desire and it's immediately truth. Of course, he does this through his energies, isn't it? But his energies in him are non-different. And this is a place where the impersonalists get really messed up. So the impersonalists, and this is nicely explained in Chaitanya Charitamrita Adi Lila, chapter 7, the impersonalists feel that Brahman is transformed into the world. But the transformation is not of Brahman, but of Brahman's energies, which on one hand are the same as him, and on the one hand are different from him. This is the Achinta Bheda Bheda Tattva. That the world is a transformation of the energies of the Lord. And these energies are all persons. So Krishna has a Leela Shakti. He has a Gyan Shakti. And they know what he wants, and they immediately arrange for it. This is what Prabhupada talked about, the first-class servant, right? The first-class servant understands the mind of the master and arranges for the desires of the master or the employer or whatever to be fulfilled without that person having to ask. Most of us wish that we had somebody like that in our life. Of course, having this desire messes up a lot of relationships, where we think, my spouse should know what I want without my having to ask. Yes? And any marital counselor will tell you this is a big problem in marriages. Well, you should have just known what I wanted. Imagine that. Like, I know people when they're getting married, they don't want to have a registry. They want people to just know what to buy for them. And I said, no, you have to have a registry. Also, otherwise you'll get 5 identical blenders. So we're looking for that. We're looking for someone who just knows us so well that they just do what we want and get what we want and say what we want without our having to give any kind of indication. And Krishna's first-class servants are like that. And of course, the next class is when you're asked, then you do. So if the spiritual master, if the Lord, whatever, says, please get me this, then you do it. And the next is you do it, but grudgingly. I don't want to do it. All right, I'll do it. I really don't want to, but I'll do it. That's charity in the mode of passion, where, you do something because you're obligated by your superior, and then you regret it later. Oh, why did I give my youthful years to the Hare Krishna movement? I should have been out earning a living. And the 10th class servant, there's no 4th through 9th I don't know what those gradations are, but the 10th class servant doesn't do, not even grudgingly, Actually, someone asked me the other day, they said, well, I haven't seen my guru for a while, and I know my guru's getting old, and maybe I should see my guru, but the last time I saw my guru asked me to do something that I didn't want to do, and I didn't do it, and I'm afraid if I see my guru again, I'll be asked to do something I don't want to do. And so I know I'm not going to follow what he says, and so I'm not sure if I should see him or not. So what should I do? I said, I don't know, maybe you should pray about it. But that's the 10th class servant, who we know in advance. I'm not gonna ask even, what can I do? I'm like, no way, because I know I'm not going to follow. But Krishna has these energies that just do. They just anticipate, and they just do. They just arrange it. Right? Just like every day we're praying to Tulsi Devi, Vrinda Devi, and this is one of her jobs. This is her main service, along with Purnamasi, that they just arrange all of these pastimes and pastime places every day for the Lord. All right, what pastime is the Lord going to like to do today? All right, well, we'll set up holy in the spring forest, and we'll set up water pastimes in the summer forest and swing pastimes in the monsoon forest. And we're going to have these thick robes and thick incense in the foggy forest. And, and we're going to arrange all these different pastimes and all these different games and different games for the cowherd boys. They play different games every day. Or arranging all the different ingredients. Srimati Radharani cooks something different every day. And someone has to know that, what ingredients to have. Right? I mean, usually you cook here, you just kind of look and see what ingredients are there, isn't it? And sometimes you can ask in advance, I'm going to plan this out, and then you got to tell somebody. So Satya Sankalpa, whatever he wants it's just there. Mm-hmm. And this is true in the material and spiritual world. Now, there's a uncomfortable aspect to this fact that all of Krishna's desires are truth. The uncomfortable aspect, which is comforting if you look at the reverse side of the coin, is also that whatever happens, Krishna has at least sanctioned. As Prabhupada said, not a blade of grass moves without the sanction of the Lord. It is not possible for anyone else to supersede Krishna's desires. Krishna's desires are truth. They are sattva. You cannot supersede Krishna's desires. Does this make sense to everybody? You can try. There's a lot of demons that try. Hiranyakashipu, of course, is the prime example. I'm going to try to supersede Krishna's desires. And the Singadev's like, nope. Not going to work. Balimar is another example. Krishna's desires always win out. One of my favorite stories is of Gandhari and Duryodhana. Gandhari's, she had 100 sons, and 99 of them were killed in the battle. So she wanted to save her last son. So she said to him, come and see me without clothes. And in those days, you pretty much followed your parents. I mean, this story probably doesn't make any sense in 2022, where people don't have this sense of obedience to their parents. But Duryodhana was like, my mother says to come see her naked. I'm going to come see her naked. So he's walking towards her, and Krishna sees him walking naked in the battlefield camp, and he's like, what are you doing? Why are you walking around naked? And he said, my mother told me to come see her without clothes. And he said, well, obviously when you were a baby and a little child, your mother saw you without clothes, but you're a grown man. It's not proper anymore. He said, but I have to obey my mother. And Krishna said, well, put on some leaf or something. That's not clothes. So you're not naked, but it's not clothes. That way you won't be violating, you'll be following the dharma of seeing your mother, but you won't be violating the dharma of being naked. So Krishna bewildered him, and he did this. Now, Gandhari had married a blind man. And in her concept of being fully obedient to her husband,
she also voluntarily acted as if she was blind. She wore a blindfold her whole life. I mean, she had many, many servants. It's not that he needed her eyes to function. I think in ordinary marriage it would be good if one of the pair was sighted. But she did this tapasya, and therefore she was called a tapasvini, a great practicer of austerities. So she knew that her austerities had given her power, and that if she removed her blindfold and looked at Duryodhana with her sankalpa of making him invincible by her glance, that it would be effective. So Duryodhana comes before her, and she says, "My dear son, have you come before me without clothes?" "Yes, mother." She takes off her blindfold and looks at him, and then she says, what have you done? Why do you have a leaf on? And he said, "Well, Krishna said." And she said, "You fool." She said, "Anything I've looked at has now become as strong as iron. But this portion of your body and the upper portion of your thighs has remained vulnerable." Now, of course, this particular story is related to the gambling match when the attempt was made to disrobe Draupadi, and Duryodhana slapped his thigh and said, "Draupadi, you already have 5 husbands. You can certainly have a 6th. You sit on my thigh and you become he was saying, become my sex slave, become my maidservant." And Bhima was so angry, he said, I take a vow that I will break your thigh. So Krishna arranged for Duryodhana's upper thigh to become vulnerable. So Krishna's desire, which is related, as we'll get to in a moment, the desire of the devotees, became fulfilled over Gandhari's desire. Does everybody follow this? Gandhari had a desire. She had her own sankalpa, and she had the potency to make her son's body as strong as iron. But Krishna's sankalpa, that Duryodhana would be killed by Bhima by having his thigh broken, that desire superseded Gandhari. And therefore, whatever desires we have, if they're not in accord with the desires of the Lord, will not be fulfilled the way that we expect. Which means that everything that happens, ultimately Krishna has to sanction. There's nobody that can do anything for us, good or bad, unless Krishna also agrees. Does everybody follow this logic? Now, the difficulty, the uncomfortableness with this is that we then come to the conclusion that the bad things that happen to us are also sent by God, or at least sanctioned by God. As Prabhupada says, nobody will argue that the good things are sent by God, but we have a hard time understanding that the bad things are sent by God. Now, of course, that's also related to our activities. I mean, we are, as the, New Agers like to say, we're the co-creators also. Because both the good and the bad that I'm getting are due, well, if I'm in the law of karma, they're due to my karma. The agent of my karma, they're just like the FedEx guy or the UPS guy. They're not delivering, no one can deliver to me something that I haven't ordered. Krishna won't allow that. And if I'm free from karma, karmadi nirdahati kintu bhakti bhajan, then whatever's happening to me, apparently good or bad, is all good by the will of the Lord. Although it may not appear that way to me in the moment. Just like a little child doesn't understand that it's good for him or her to go to bed at a certain time and put their toys away. They just don't understand. Why is that good? They argue about it. Right? The other day when I was visiting my family, and Padma says to Abhimanyu, you have to share this toy with your brother. And he screams for 5 minutes. But that's for his benefit, right? You want your children to grow up knowing how to share, isn't it? But he doesn't see it like that. So the so-called bad things that happen to us when we're in devotional life are for our benefit. And the so-called bad things that happen to us when we're under the laws of karma are all our doing. Now, of course, although Krishna's Satya Sankalpa, in rasa, So sometimes things appear a little differently with his devotees because otherwise there's no taste. And the two examples that I like are with Aghasura and with Rukmini. So with Aghasura, this huge demon comes, and the cowherd boys say, "What's that? Is it a statue?" "I think it's a demon." "It's a demon? Ah, it stinks. I think it's alive. Maybe it's a demon." "Oh, but if we go into the demon, then Krishna will play the hero and rescue us, and we know he likes to do that. So let's go in, let's go in." And they all go into Aghasura, and Krishna's like, "I didn't want them to go into Aghasura." So apparently his Satya Sankalpa didn't work then. You understand? Because he was saying, "I didn't want them to go into Aghasura." All right, now I got to figure out how to kill the demon without hurting them, because they're inside. But it's explained that Krishna's Leela Shakti understood that Krishna likes to play the hero, and she actually arranged this. But apparently it wasn't according to Krishna's desire. Or another example is Rukmini, where Krishna's teasing Rukmini, and he's saying, "You can divorce me and marry Shishupal. It's not too late." In a society where divorce was basically unheard of and she was already a grandmother. I mean, it was just... And she's like, "Krishna's going to leave me." And she faints. And Krishna takes her up and he says, "I didn't think you would faint. I thought that you would banter." Prabhupada said this is one of the pleasures in household life, the banter between husband and wife. I know one couple, they tell me, they said, the greatest pleasure we have in our marriage is our little petty arguments. One time I was visiting them and they started arguing like that. They said, "Urmila, you should leave. This is our enjoyment, but you won't understand it." Okay. So Krishna says to Rukmini, "I wanted you to argue with me." So you could say his Satya Sankalpa didn't work then. But Krishna likes this. It's not that he wants his devotees to be robots. We like surprise parties, most of us anyway. Yes? So now, what about the jiva? Also in the Chandogya Upanishad 871 and 873, the jiva is listed as Satya Sankalpa. Now that's interesting. That the jiva, the soul, also has all their desires fulfilled. But of course not independently. Nitya Nityanam Chaitanas Chaitanam Eko Bahunam Yavidadanti Kaman. That among all the living entities, Krishna is fulfilling everyone's desire. And you can say, "Well, I'm not getting my desires fulfilled in this world," but we are. We're just idiots. Sorry. I mean, me too. We just don't know what to desire. That's all. We desire things that harm us. We're just foolish. But yes, everything we're getting is our desire. And spiritually, everything we get is our desire, but at least we know what to desire. Of course, in this world, even though everything we get is our desire, we still have to work for it, isn't it? You can't just sit around and desire. I desire. It's not like that. And there's one really nice lecture that Prabhupada gave on Bhagavad Gita 7, 8 through 14, where Krishna says, "Kama raga vivarjitam," that Krishna is kama raga vivarjitam. It's one of the lists. When Krishna identifies in the Bhagavad Gita, "I am this, I am this, I am this, I am this." And Prabhupada says, kama. Kama means desire. Raga vivarjitam, without attraction. Desire without attraction, that is Krishna. Desire without attraction, how can it be possible? Desire without attraction. Whenever we desire something, I want some young girl, I desire. Desire means I have got attraction. But desire without attraction, how is it possible? Can you explain? Yes. Desire without attraction means Krishna consciousness. I desire for Krishna's benefit, not for my benefit. That is desire without attraction, so that kama raga vivarjitam. So when the living entity has that kind of desire, then the living entity is Satya Sankalpa, just like Krishna.
Krishna, who is Swarat, ki jai.